A lake can look perfectly serene from above, a mirror of the sky, calm, healthy. But beneath that placid surface, a powerful, invisible process is often unfolding. A slow, silent decline called eutrophication. It's the gradual, almost imperceptible shift of an entire ecosystem, from balance to instability, and finally, to collapse. For decades, when we thought about saving a sick lake, our attention focused almost exclusively on what was flowing into it. We looked at the nutrients pouring in from farm runoff, from city stormwater drains, from leaky septic systems. We measured the nitrogen and phosphorus from fertilizers and wastewater. And that is a critical part of the story. But it's not the whole story. The real engine of this collapse isn't found on the sunlit surface. It lies deep inside the lake itself, buried in the dark, mucky sediment at the bottom. This is where the downward spiral of eutrophication truly begins its devastating work. Over many years, everything that lives and dies in the lake or falls into it ends up on the bottom. Algae, aquatic weeds, fallen leaves, and all other organic debris sink down. Microbes go to work, decomposing this material into a thick, black, nutrient-rich layer of sediment. Think of it as a compost pile at the bottom of the lake. But this pile doesn't stay dormant. It's an active chemical reactor, and it continually leaks a slow, steady supply of nutrients back into the water. This process is called internal nutrient loading. It is the lake's own self-poisoning mechanism. Here's how the spiral starts to turn. That slow release of nutrients from the bottom sediment, combined with new nutrients from runoff, acts like a super fertilizer for the water. The first, most visible effect is an algae bloom. The water turns a murky, soupy green. When that massive population of algae dies, or is killed off with chemical algicides, it doesn't just vanish. The dead cells sink, adding a huge new layer of organic material to the bottom. Now, the decomposers, the bacteria and fungi in the sediment, have a massive feast. As they break down this new layer of dead algae, they consume enormous amounts of dissolved oxygen from the water. This creates oxygen-poor conditions near the bottom. Imagine the deep water slowly darkening, starved of light and life. This state is called hypoxia. Under normal, healthy conditions, the lake has a cleanup crew. Tiny creatures called benthic zooplankton live in the sediment, constantly grazing on and consuming organic matter. They are the lake's janitors, but they can't survive in low oxygen water. As hypoxia sets in, the zooplankton die off. Without these grazers, the organic debris accumulates even faster. The muck layer gets thicker. Layer upon layer, year after year, the problem compounds itself. This is where the feedback loops kick into high gear. In a low-oxygen environment, the chemistry of the sediment fundamentally changes. Nutrients like phosphorus, which were once safely locked away in the muck, are chemically released. They begin to surge upwards into the water column, fueling the next, even larger generation of algae blooms. This is sediment nutrient recycling, the second powerful driver of this decline. The lake is now feeding itself. At this point, even if you were to cut off all external sources of pollution, the lake would continue to get worse on its own. And it's not just algae. This nutrient-rich muck is also the perfect rooting ground for invasive weeds like Eurasian water milfoil. These weeds can form dense, choking mats that block sunlight and crowd out native plants. When these weeds die, or are treated with herbicides, they too sink to the bottom, adding yet another thick blanket of organic matter to the sediment. The muck layer grows, the oxygen drops further, and the internal nutrient recycling intensifies. The lake is now caught in a vicious cycle. Hypoxia is killing off the beneficial life at the bottom, and the sediment nutrient recycling it causes is feeding endless blooms at the surface. Together, these two forces destabilize the entire ecosystem. As the oxygen continues to decline and the nutrient levels skyrocket, The very nature of the algae community begins to shift. Beneficial, healthy algae are outcompeted by a more aggressive, dangerous group, cyanobacteria. These are often called blue-green algae, and their dominance leads to what we know as harmful algal blooms. They form thick, toxic, paint-like scums on the surface that block all sunlight from reaching below. The toxins they produce, called cyanotoxins, are a serious threat. They can cause skin rashes, liver damage, and neurological problems in humans and animals that come into contact with or drink the water. In many lakes in the U.S., severe cyanobacterial blooms in recent years have created massive ecological and economic crises, serving as a stark warning of where this spiral leads. The rest of the aquatic life now struggles to survive in this toxic, oxygen-starved environment. Fish and invertebrates die off. Their bodies sink, adding even more organic matter to the sediment. Another turn in the spiral. Hypoxia worsens. Sediment recycling increases. Cyanobacteria spread. The feedback loop grows stronger and faster with each cycle. So let's trace the full loop. First, nutrients from outside and inside the lake fuel algae growth. Second, the algae die and sink. Third, their decomposition consumes oxygen. Fourth, hypoxia forms in the deep water. Fifth, the low oxygen sediments release even more nutrients. Sixth, toxic cyanobacteria begin to dominate. Seventh, fish and the helpful zooplankton decline. Eighth, more dead organic matter accumulates on the bottom. And ninth, the cycle repeats, spinning faster and more intensely each time. And climate change acts as an accelerant, with warmer temperatures speeding up decomposition and giving cyanobacteria a competitive advantage, while more intense rainstorms wash even more nutrients into the water. Eutrophication is a complex, insidious process. Its true power is generated by the self-sustaining engine deep within the lake, a destructive cycle of hypoxia, nutrient recycling, and ecological imbalance. To break the spiral, we can't just focus on the symptoms we see on the surface. We have to address these root causes in the sediment. Only by healing the lake from the bottom up can this spiral finally be reversed and the water restored to long-term resilient health.